Okie dokie. This is an extra credit assignment where you're going to learn how to animate frame by frame drawings in a program called Moho. You can also do this in Photoshop or Animate or Harmony. There's many other programs that you can do this. We're going to learn about frame by frame layers, about the brushes that you can use, about styles, and about the intervals of frames that you can use. It's a really fun medium, but you have to set a bunch of stuff up. So if you do any of this, you can present it to me and you will get extra credit based on your effort and how much you put into it. Something like this would be worth probably a couple of points toward a project score if you pulled this off. So let me know what you're up to if you want to do this, if you need more help, but this is what you're going to try to create in Moho. Okay, in order to do some frame-by-frame animation, you need some software that can handle it. Moho is one of them. You can do this in Photoshop or Animate or Harmony or all sorts of programs, but this one's one you guys have on your computers. So let's do a couple of things, make sure that we can set this up. We're going to go to File, Project Settings, or when you start your new project, I'm just going to make mine square. Height and width are the same dimensions. And then frame rate of 12 is what I would recommend. And then maybe your end frame is 100. You don't need a really long timeline for this one. I've set up a layer already. Usually you get layer 1 or something, and I've just drawn some shapes on there with the shape tool here, draw shape tool, as if it was going to be some obstacles that my ball could bounce off of or my object or whatever. But then you need a frame by frame layer. So we go here, new layer, and we choose frame by frame. And I'm going to name it frame by frame, or abbreviated anyway. So now you have your layers ready to go. The next thing I would do for setup is to create a style. When you're dealing with frame by frame, you're dealing with a lot of different drawings, and if you can set up a style beforehand, you're going to save a ton of time if you want to edit later on. The way you do that is go to Styles, New. You can name it. I'm just going to name this ball. You can set your color. Now I'm going to be using a tool that's just using a stroke. So this stroke is correct. And then I'm going to start with, I don't know, maybe 10 points of width. I'm also going to choose a brush style, something like that. You can play with these settings now, or you can edit them later, and it's okay. So that's my style of ball. I have my layers set up, and now it's time to figure out how to add frames to my frame-by-frame layer. There's a little section over here with a plus, a minus, 2 rectangles, and then a number. This is to add a frame, new frame, or subtract frame. This is to duplicate, and this is how many frames in between each frame that you add is going to be, or basically the interval. The keyboard shortcut for add frame is F5. I would get that down. And then duplicate frame is F6. Once you type this in, it'll take hold after you press F5 or new frame. So first we're gonna go to frame number, let's see, make sure my underskinning's off. Frame number 1, that's when we're gonna start drawing. And I'm going to press the new frame button. And make sure that you're on your frame by frame layer, otherwise it won't work. You press the add new frame button. And now you can see that your timeline has changed and it's ready for you to animate. And I'm gonna draw something on here. Okay, you can see that it's entering the artwork that you've drawn. It's also applied the style that we chose. So I'm gonna press F5 again. And it's gonna add another frame, and then I can draw again. Okay, so that's the basics. I'm just going to go forward and backward. So there's 2 frames of animation. What's cool about styles is that if you change the style, let's just change, if I go to styles, ball, make sure that that's pulled up, and I click on stroke color and change the color and go forward and backward, it has applied that style throughout. If you wanted to change the interval, let's say to 2, it would add a frame 2 frames later. So you can slow this up or speed this down that way too. But we only have 12 frames per second, so I wouldn't change it much past that. Depends how choppy you want it to be. So I'm going to back out of this. And next we're going to go into what onion skinning is. So before, when we added a frame and we drew on it, I'm just going to draw a circle. You couldn't see the next frame. Okay, when we press F5, it's blank, right? there's nothing there. So it's hard to know what you drew last frame. And the whole purpose of using a computer to draw this stuff is so you can see the previous frame. If your software doesn't allow this, then you're not using the right software. This button right here is onion skinning, and this only comes with the Pro version. So if you're using the debut version, it's too bad. And then you have this dialog box with all sorts of options. So relative frames is probably the most important part of this. Is basically relative frames, it follows your playhead. Notice that these two blocks follow my playhead. That means that if I'm on this frame, what this is going to say is it's going to preview the last frame and the previous one before that. So it follows my cursor. If I was to turn that off, it would only preview those two frames and it would stay locked. So it's a little different. For frame by frame, oops, I usually have those on. Okay, and now it's all messed up because I moved my playhead. So you can fix that. You just turn these off and on by clicking on them. So really I want to see the previous frame and also the one before that. So I like this setup. Okay, so now I can see in my current drawing, I can see my previous frame here. If I enter a new frame, I can see my previous frame and the one before that. So it's a ghost basically. I can also preview frames before or in the future, and they'll be green if you do need to, but I usually have a couple of those on. And then I can keep drawing. Press F5, and it goes pretty fast once you get kind of the keyboard shortcuts down, and you can see what's happening with all this. And then you can play it back, and it won't play with the onion skin on, but just know onion skin is a huge tool, and definitely use that. And so now it's time to really draw this thing. You have your frame by frame layer, you have your obstacles layer if you want to, you have a style setup that's selected, and then now it's time to choose the tool, and let's talk about the freehand tool. There's also the blob brush tool, but I would stick to this. There are two different versions of what you can draw. Freehand tool is going to be drawn with a stroke. And if I was to select that, you can see it's just a line. And I can actually go in and whoops and select that line, and it's got Bezier handles, and I can manipulate that. Pretty easy to do. You also have the blob brush tool, which is I'm going to turn off onion skinning. Basically, it's a filled version of a shape. So it's drawn differently, and you can see there's many more points with it, but this is actually kind of a cool way to draw things. Some settings you have on both of them. You have the smoothing dial. If I go to my freehand tool, it's found under here, freehand options. Using pen pressure is good. Taper start and end, I usually have that off. Smoothing, you can turn that up or down based on how much help you want. If you have it off, it should draw what you draw. If you have it completely on, it's going to assist you and draw a smoother curve. So FYI. Point reduction I usually have around 10 to 20 or so. So play with those settings. There's also all sorts of settings here. I usually have auto stroke on, and that's about it. You can close shapes if you want to. You can fill them if you want to, but let's just start here. So I'm going to select all my objects that I've drawn, Control A or Command A, and then delete to get started. So I need a frame to begin with, new frame or F5. Make sure I have my freehand tool, my style is set over here, and now I can start drawing. Basically, what I want to do is I want to have a ball come here, it's going to come up here, bounce here, hit the wall, and kind of do this ping pong action, and then exit. That's the plan. Well, let's see how it goes. First I need to start with a ball that's sort of over here. And if I don't have my onion skinning on, I'm going to turn it on and then continue drawing. I'm going to rapidly draw this. I'm going to speed up the video so you really see what happens frame by frame after a few of these drawings. You can work on squash and stretch here. Remember, and Control Z is undo if you don't like it. You can also work on easing. The closer the drawings are together, the slower it's going to go. for me right here, this is the fastest point right here. It's going to enter the scene really fast. So I'm stretching this out. Maybe it's even further away. It's also stretching the actual shape. So there's distance between, that means it's going to be moving fast, and also the squash and stretch. Those two work hand in hand pretty well. And right here is going to be my impact. Maybe it bends like that, we'll see. Okay, maybe it comes out even more. And you can exaggerate things, right? Like right here, it's just gonna fire off of this. Come over here, maybe it's doing like that. So now it's time to speed this up so you can see the whole process, and then we'll show you a final one when we get done. Okay, so we've completed our animation. Then you just drag your playhead back and give it a watch. And if you want to go back and edit, you can select these frames and go back into your frame by frame layer. You can delete these layers if you want to. Like if you didn't, I'm not particularly a fan of the ending. I think that should be a little slower and smoother. So you can smooth that out. That curve isn't the best, but it's pretty cool. And you can you can add more frame by frame layers if you like. You can add fill layers if you like, but just focus on some outlines and some obstacles to get a feel for it. And you can obviously export your animation. Don't forget to save your work in case you want to come back and work on it later. Hope you liked it. Hopefully that's easy, and you can get some extra credit points out of just some simple frame by frame animation.